Hey friends, I'm Christy and you're listening to Rock the Damn Boat, a podcast for women who are done playing small. If you've been shrinking to keep the peace or waiting for permission to want more, climb aboard because we are going to make some waves together. Don't forget to follow or subscribe so you're never left stranded on the shore. And if you want a more connected experience, visit thrivewithchristy.com to learn more about the Thrive Collective, a community that combines boat rocking energy with the grounding effects of yoga and breathwork with live calls and classes. Now on to the show. I am excited to be back with a Sunday shorty and feeling a little more in a groove with my life and the new job and things that I have on my plate. So I am going to do my best to stick back to my regular routine with Sunday episodes. Now, interview-wise, I am a little quiet. I recorded quite a few episodes leading up to the month of July. So if you know of anyone who is a boat rocker in your mind or someone who is looking for a bigger way to use their voice and they are boat rockers, then please send them my way. They can visit my website and fill out the contact form. And I would love to hear from people. If you are a female founder, if you have started a nonprofit, if you have done something that you are especially proud of and you want to join with me to inspire other women to rock the damn boat, then I want to have a conversation. So I'm excited to get started on some new episodes. I understand now why a lot of podcasters will have seasons. I also know that as a solopreneur, when it comes to the podcasting space, that lining up interviews, getting questions out, getting social media out after the fact is difficult and very time consuming. So that's a little bit why you may not hear interviews on Wednesdays come across for a few weeks. I have been podcasting since October of last year. It is August now. So we are fast approaching the 1-year anniversary of Rock the Damn Boat. And if you don't know the story behind the title of the podcast, I talked in my sobriety memoir, which is called Strong Roots, Wayward Soul, available on Amazon and also on my website, that my mom was taught not to rock the boat. I'm Gen X. A lot of women before us, our moms were taught not to rock the boat. A lot of women, our parents, grandparents were taught children should be seen and not heard. So we are starting to push the envelope on a lot of conditioning from our parents. And I used the phrase, don't rock the boat, in my book. My book turns 5 this month. So in August of 2021, I self-published my memoir, Strong Roots, Wayward Soul. I would be honored if you have not read it yet. If you went and bought a copy, you can also download on Kindle and read the digital version. If you want a version from me that is signed, then order on my website, thrivewithchristy.com. I am talking about a couple of topics today that are completely opposite of each other, but it's about bias. And if you have heard the terms negativity bias or confirmation bias, then you would be right if you think that those are pretty different concepts. I wanted to explain both and talk a little bit about how they work in your life so that maybe if you're not aware of these biases, you can start to notice. And there's nothing inherently wrong with either of them. They can just create patterns of responding to things that we may not recognize and kind of keep us trapped in these patterns, especially when we talk about negativity bias. Friday night, I went to a book club at Happily Ever After is the bookstore near me. Stephanie is an amazing soul sister. We have the same birthday, and she has a romance book and yarn store in Walnut Springs, Texas. So tiny little spot, but she's a wonderful little hub of creativity and self-expression. We read the book Whistler by Ann Patchett. And admittedly, I have never read Ann Patchett, even though I know she's been a huge best-selling author. I was intrigued because of the cover, which is a picture of it. It's actually an illustration of a horse, and there's a story in the book about this horse named Whistler. The story itself is a family drama, and it's kind of a slow burn. Admittedly, as an author, I thought the writing was simple, and it made for an easy read. Sometimes you'll read a passage in other books that is so bogged down in details and in describing everything about the scene that it can seem heavy. This was the total opposite of that. So I did appreciate that about Ann Patchett's writing. The story itself, not that intriguing to me, but to go to book club and be with about 10 other women, some of whom were staunchly defending the story and how amazing it was. And not because I was poking at them in any way, but as we started to talk about characters, some of the women were super attached to characters and thought they were amazing, and others found them offensive or narcissistic. So I was listening to these 10, 12 women talk about all of the different characters, the way they might have been offended or endeared by certain behaviors, certain scenes throughout the book, reminded me how different we all are. And it's not as if that's not obvious in political headlines and things like that, but just in how we interpret a book. It was so fascinating to me from a sociological point of view. And as a writer, it was important to me because I just had about a dozen women read The Shipyard Sisters, my book that is coming out in the next year. I had some really consistent feedback, which was great. And then I had some stuff that was definitely open to interpretation. The ending was one of the questions that I asked women about, and some of them loved it. Some of them were left wanting more. Let's talk about negativity bias and confirmation bias. And negativity bias is something that a lot of us probably do throughout the day. We may not even realize that we are doing this. We hone in on the one thing that is bad, even though we may hear 100 things that are good. Negativity bias is an innate psychological tendency to notice, dwell on, and remember negative experiences and information more than positive ones. It affects how we make decisions, view others, and process daily events. And we are hardwired biologically to treat things like predators or dangerous environments as fear, right? We have fight or flight. So we remember, oh, if I touch that hot stove, it's going to burn me. We save ourselves by remembering that. So I have a negativity bias toward that glowing red electric coil on the stove because I know it's hot. And things that kind of sneak into our daily lives could be hearing so much positive feedback about my writing, but focusing on one negative piece of information. It could be something like one of these women at the book club talking about we could have a character who is really a good person, but they say one bad thing or make one mistake in this book, and all of a sudden we're vilifying them. And I'm not saying that happened, but it's just an example. It can also be letting something bad overshadow everything that's good about a person, or fearing a loss more than a gain. It talks about being loss averse, but we're also risk averse. And we're like, oh, I'm going to make this decision, and this is all the stuff that's going to go wrong. So one of the things that when I coach women, whether I'm on retreat or working with women, I talk about what could go right, like play the tape forward and what could go right. And I've seen that too, as it relates to like, what if I fail? And it's like, but what if you succeed? So we tend to have this negativity bias confirming our failure, that we're going to fail at something. And then it talks about media as being a common example. If you look at the news, what do we get pulled in by? The bad news, the train wreck, the things that are going wrong, the salacious details about things. If you look at any Netflix documentary, what makes a good Netflix documentary? All the deception and the betrayal and all of the bad things that happen. So media tends to play up all of the negativity, and we're there for it, right? We're intrigued by it. I had a friend recently who received some really glowing feedback from a coworker, and she was disappointed that the coworker pointed out something else that they needed to work on. I used to get so frustrated too when I didn't get the gold star and just get the gold star and no but attached to it. We tend to think like, oh, this is great. I did a great job. And what did I do wrong that I need to fix for next time? And if we get that kind of feedback that's meant to be constructive, a lot of times we focus in on the negative part of that feedback. That's our brain at work, exhibiting negativity bias because that's its job, to focus on keeping us safe. I am someone who does not give myself credit for things. And the more and more I learn about ADHD, I think it has to do with that. And I also, as I talked about recently, have figured I'm an Enneagram 9 and I'm a 9 wing 1, and 1 is perfectionist tendencies. I know that that's something that's just ingrained in me. So if someone gives me positive and constructive feedback at once, I am absolutely going to focus on the constructive feedback and not the good stuff. And even when people give me glowing feedback, I always want to know, well, what could I do better? Because in my mind, I didn't do a perfect job. Now, I've done a lot of work on this, so I tend to not focus on the negative. I always say I'm an eternal optimist. I'm a glass half full kind of person, but I still get caught up in this negativity bias at times. So a few tips, again, from Google AI, how to overcome it. Be mindful when you get trapped in this negativity loop. Whether it's a person in your life or a project you're working on or a customer at work. And actually, Colette Jane Fair talks about the negative partner story. So we start to focus on the bad and then we can't see the good. Practice gratitude for that person, for that situation, or gratitude in other places in your life that can help spill over and improve your attitude about everything else that's happening. And then reframing a situation. So actively look for positive or neutral aspects of a stressful situation. Focus on the positive feedback that you got. Forget the negative. Or know that you're going to have an opportunity in the future to do things differently. What did you do well that you can take into that future project or that future interaction? I talked recently about boundaries and how hard it is to set boundaries. And if you're anything like me, you set a boundary and then you feel really icky about it. And we tend to have that negativity bias around a boundary of, oh, this person isn't going to like me, or they're going to have an adverse reaction to me setting this boundary. So if it goes well, feel empowered by that. That is negativity bias, and I want to make you aware of it so that if you start to focus on the negative, then you're robbing yourself of all of that positivity that is coming your way alongside it. Now, on the flip side, one thing that I love to think about is confirmation bias. And science will tell you that it's a lot of phooey, but I totally disagree. Confirmation bias is where once you set your mind to something, that's sort of all you see. And a lot of times you'll hear the example of a car that you want. And all of a sudden, that's all you see on the road. Our brain is literally filtering the information down to what we want to see. And it says that it's the human tendency to search for, favor, and remember information that matches what we already believe. So going back to the book club example, It might be that I am closed off to someone else's point of view about a character or part of the story, but as soon as somebody says something that I agree with, I'm like, oh yeah, that was exactly how I saw it. And there's, again, nothing inherently wrong with confirmation bias. We like to hear that, not that we are right, but that other people share their same point of view because it makes us feel less alone. It goes back to feeling safe. We are safe as humans when we are connected with one another, when we have people to protect us. Maybe the downside of confirmation bias is it could mean looking at only websites or news that agree with our point of views. Think about your algorithm. So if you are on social media at all, which I'm certain every single one of you has some platform that you use, your algorithm has started to only feed you things that you agree with. And that's great in the sense that we don't want to be triggered by stuff that offends us. So of course, I'm watching yoga videos. I'm listening to people creating content that makes me feel good about myself and that encourages my eternal optimism. Now, biased memory can look like remembering when you were right and not confessing when you're wrong. It's like my husband and I will piece together a story and we'll be like, okay, but I remember it this way. He'll remember it a different way. And we're like, well, who was right? In some cases, we can't agree on the details of the story, and that's okay. It probably wasn't that important. And then wrong meaning. So sometimes we can perceive things incorrectly because of our confirmation bias. You might see something that is fake news, but you want so desperately to believe it that you're like, start telling people all of this news only to learn that it wasn't true, that it was a hoax. Remember, Chat, Claude, any AI, they will tell you in the little fine print that it can make mistakes. So you can't even always believe what you read or learn from AI. Certainly, you cannot always believe what you see. Confirmation bias is going to make you see what you want to believe, and you have to decide, is that true? Or are we, kind of fueling ourselves with things that make us live in sort of a bubble? I don't believe that you should stop it unless you are using it to be very polarized from other people. You have to be open to other points of view. So you can't live in such a bubble that your confirmation bias doesn't allow you to see that other people don't always agree with you or might have a different experience. Start to look for things that might challenge your ideas. My example of my friend getting that feedback and most of it being glowing, I had to challenge her bias. It was kind of a weird combination of confirmation bias and negativity bias because she said, oh, this always happens. So it was confirming for her that she's always going to get negative feedback along with this positivity. And I said, to me, from the outside looking in, that's nothing but a compliment. And she was like, okay, you're right. You may need to be kind of shaken up and shaken out of that belief. And then try to prove your own ideas wrong rather than ways to prove them right. I had a yoga studio for 2 years. And when I opened my yoga studio, I said, oh, there's a neighboring town that has 20,000 people in it. There's a lot of college students. I'm going to draw in all of these people to come take yoga classes because there's really not a yoga studio there in that town. Well, guess what? I learned later that people don't really want to drive. And in this economy over the last 2 years, and especially in 2026, as gas prices soar, nobody wants to drive because of gas money, not just time, which is already a valuable resource. Now, looking back, I was like, oh, I could have tested that idea further, but I was so in my eternal optimism that I thought that I could overcome that no matter what. And I'm not even going to get into manifestation today because I have a lot of thoughts about that these days. But what I do want to add on to confirmation bias quickly is the idea of synchronicity. Because I also Googled, are confirmation bias and synchronicity the same things? And what I learned was that the idea of synchronicity, which is taking two unrelated things and assuming that they are correlated or that they're meaningfully intertwined, even if there's no evidence of that. The concept of synchronicity was developed by Carl Jung in the early 1900s. He believed in synchronicity, and it's one of those things, if you see a cardinal and you think that that's the spirit of a loved one who has come to visit you, that is synchronicity. I have been watching the show Heroes on Netflix, and I keep seeing they're standing at an apartment door in several scenes throughout this season, and the apartment number is 613. My birthday is June 13th, 613. So, of course, when I see the apartment door, I'm like, wow, the show itself doesn't have to have anything to do with my life, even though there is also a character who went to a 12-step meeting on the show the same day that I went back to a recovery meeting. But for me, synchronicity helps affirm for me that I'm on the right path in life and that I'm making the right decisions. And even though I'm going to see 613 on the clock twice a day, and I happen to see that number on the TV, like, it's an interesting coincidence. And sometimes you think, well, coincidence is more than that. It is a sign from the universe. It is a sign from God. Part of the reason synchronicity was on my mind is because we went and watched The Odyssey today. Even though it says that synchronicity was developed in the early 1900s, think back to Greek mythology. They attributed everything that happened in this world to a certain god or goddess. There almost was no synchronicity. It was, this is a direct result of a god being angered or a god being pleased with us. And it's just so fascinating to me because they were blaming tumultuous seas on Poseidon being angry. Well, that was confirmation bias at work and negativity bias at work because it confirmed for them they didn't want to set sail, and Odysseus did. He said, we need to go this way. And they said, no, we don't. And everything that happened after that was bad, they said he had angered Poseidon and it was all a result of that. When in reality, storms happen every day, right? I just love this idea that some of these things that we attribute to modern psychology have really been around in concept since ancient times. And they get delivered to us in different ways. I think about the golden rule. They kept talking about that as Zeus's rule, to treat others as you want to be treated. I did not remember that from Greek mythology, but that is still something that we hold fast to today, right? So that is just, I don't know, a really interesting musing around confirmation bias, negativity bias, synchronicity, all these things that not only intertwine in our lives every day, but you can see examples of it throughout your daily life, right? You go to a book club and you hear all of these differing points of view, and you get to choose, do I want to debate something in here? Do I want to share my point of view? Do I agree with someone else? Can you have this healthy and supportive conversation that doesn't mean that you have to be angry at somebody for their point of view or, withdraw and not speak up because you don't share a point of view? Figure out what that means for you in your daily lives and your daily connections. And then this idea of confirmation bias and synchronicity. What does that look like for you? Do you feel like you tend to look for only the good things or only the signs that support your own belief? Or is it more like synchronicity where you're aware of it and it helps you feel good about yourself, but that you're open to other points of view or differing points of view? As much as I get frustrated with my husband for always being the realist, I do see how sometimes he is just helping me come get my head out of the clouds. Everything is going to work out. I truly believe that. But I tend to not want to acknowledge the hard times, and they happen. So I am so glad that I am connecting with you again in this way, and I hope that you find some value out of this Sunday shorty. I would love it if you left comments on Apple or Spotify and left a review, and you can go check this out on YouTube. You can comment on YouTube. I want to make sure that we're growing the audience so that the people that I have on are reaching their right audience and that we are informing others and helping them live more, assertive lives, because we are rocking the damn boat around here. I want everyone to know that their voice matters. So that's it for me. I will talk to you again soon. You've been listening to Rock the Damn Boat, a podcast produced and recorded by Christy Hughes. You can follow, subscribe on both Apple and Spotify, and your 5-star review goes a long way. Thank you so much for your support of the show.